Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Webcast. My name is Christine Dorsey Davis. I'm the Executive Director of the Ohio chapter of the American Planning Association, and I am your Webcast moderator. Today is March 22nd, and we will hear Trails as Resilient Infrastructure. And if you're on these webinars frequently at all, you know that I never know what the date is, and I always have to look at the last moment. For any technical questions during the webinar, you can type those in the Q&A box and I'll do my best to answer those. For your questions related to the presentation, again, just type those in the Q&A box and we'll get to those at the end of the presentation during the Q&A. If your question is for a particular panelist, it just helps me if you list the panelist with your question, please. Today, we are sponsored by the Sustainability and Resilience series, and you're going to hear a little bit more about this. It's a collaborative effort of APA divisions, and we just love having them. And you're going to hear more about this series here coming up, but we wanted to say thank you and welcome as always. Coming up on your screen is a list of our upcoming sessions. We're taking a short break for NPC season, whether you're going to be there in person or online or not at all. If you are going to be at NPC and you see me floating around the halls or you hear my booming voice because it booms, be sure to come up and say hello. I love talking to folks and seeing who's behind my screen that I don't get to see. So be sure to say hello. So you can register for these and all of our upcoming sessions by heading over to our website, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. Today's session has been approved for 1.5 CM credits and one of the sustainability and resilience required credits. So if you have AICP, be sure to log those by heading over to planning.org, log into your My APA account, and you can search by the title or event number, both of which can be found on our website, again, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. If you're on social media, be sure to like us on Facebook. That's where I post any important date or time changes when new sessions are up and available for registration. So be sure to like us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We record all of our sessions and post them up there. And you're going to hear, I think, a little bit more from Jim here in a moment about this, but we do have like a special mini channel almost of all of the sustainability and resilience series sessions, kind of like in their own folder. So head over to YouTube and type in Planning Webcast, and our well over 500 recordings are up there and available for you to view for free. So that is the end of my housekeeping items. Again, if you have a question, type it in that Q&A box. We'll get to it at the end. Please don't raise your hand because we don't connect sound with all of you. It's just typing those questions in. So I'll be lowering your hand if I see it raised. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jim Schwab, who's going to kick things off and talk just for a moment about the Sustainability and Resilience series and what's coming up. So Jim, take it away.
Thank you. I'm Jim Schwab with Jim Schwab Consulting, a firm I created for myself after I left APA about 7 years ago, where I was for a long time the manager of the hazards planning division. I'm also an adjunct faculty out at the University of Iowa, teaching a course on disaster recovery and mitigation. I'm happy to present today's session. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the series and encourage you to check out all of our offerings. The series was created to provide opportunities for planning professionals to broaden and deepen their knowledge while allowing them to earn their ICP Sustainability and Resilience CM credit live or on demand. And we are thankful to Christine Dorsey and the Planners Webcast series for partnering with us to bring the series to life. Series recordings are a permanent library of resources available for free, thanks to the dedicated efforts of fellow professionals donating their time and expertise to make presentations and organize events. Now available on the YouTube playlist are all of these great sessions, too many to read off here, all of which have been part of this series. Use the QR code shown to find any of these, and we'll also post in the chat. Today's recording will be available soon on the same platform. And there are more exciting sessions with top-notch professionals in store for 2024. So stay tuned for more events to take place this year. Next slide. You are about to hear Trails as Resilient Infrastructure. During today's session, you will hear from a panel of professionals in various professional settings who have firsthand knowledge about trail system development to share with us as we anticipate their implementation in our communities in the near and not so distant future. Trails are part of a resilient transportation infrastructure system and can be planned and designed to be resilient and sustainable, as well as play a role in emergency planning and response. Trails of all kinds are places for recreation, exercise, and active transportation. They are also a crucial tool for making communities more resilient in the face of climate change and other emergencies. We will come away today with a better understanding of the purposes and uses of trails, and with in-depth exposure to the issues planners need to understand about them and their implementation. Hopefully, this will instill in you some ideas about how they may be utilized in your own communities and cities. Planners can make a visible and important difference, given their role in putting forth solutions to problems and facilitating a local process that connects to as well as influences broader efforts. Actions that have the potential to create lasting positive change in the community and the environment around us. 3 brief presentations will be followed by an opportunity for Q&A. There will be a few polling questions as well, which will help us get to better know your familiarity and views about this topic. Today's speakers are ready to share their expertise on this subject, and I'll let them introduce themselves more fully. We are going to hear from Michael Hintz, who is the Director of Planning with the Toole Design Group, Sarah Walwama, the Climate Project Manager at the Trust for Public Land, and Mikey Goralnik, Planner and Landscape Architect with the Great Springs Project. So thanks for attending today, and we're going to have a brief polling question, and then I'll turn it over to Michael Hintz to make our first presentation.
All right, wonderful. So folks, I'm gonna go ahead and launch this here. Let me get over to my polls. Okay, so you'll see a pop-up on your screen. If you are on a mobile device, sometimes the pop-ups don't work depending on the settings for your mobile device. But the question is, what type of agency or organization do you work for? Municipality, county, MPO, RPO, state fed, nonprofit, advocacy, private sector? Are you a student? Other? I used to put an unknown or not sure. I changed it to other. I'll give it a few more seconds here. We have quite an array, just seeing what's going on here now. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end our poll here and share the results. So 30% are coming from one of our municipalities. We have quite a few folks here on the private sector, so it's nice to see you. And we have some county. We have a little bit of just about everybody here. State, fed, yeah, we're all here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. Thanks for answering that, for letting us know who's on the line. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Michael, to kick things off for us.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for having me as part of this really interesting panel discussion this morning. As Jim mentioned, my name's Michael Hintz. I am the Director of Planning for Toole Design in our Seattle office. And my focus is on active transportation and all the different flavors that comes in. And I'm really excited to share an overview of this new guidebook that came out just a few months ago from FHWA. I was one of the co-authors, and as a planner who's deeply passionate about active transportation and climate action, I found it to be an extremely rewarding project to work on. So I'm excited to share it with you this morning. So let's jump right in. So the guidebook really does cover a lot. It identifies best practices in context-based trail planning, design, siting, construction, management, and maintenance for all kinds of trails, from urban to very natural trails. It also discusses how trails can be planned and designed and used to aid in emergency preparedness and response. It really does cover all kinds of trails. The definition of trails, which is included on this slide, is what the working definition that the guidebook is focused on. Shared use paths, paved and natural surface trails, trails for both motorized and non-motorized use. I think a key feature of the guidebook are the case studies. There's about 10 detailed case studies of trails that have been developed with resiliency in mind. And these case studies discuss the challenges, around design and implementation, the management of these trails, how they were funded, and results and lessons learned. So really a valuable resource. This morning, since don't have a lot of time, I'm going to focus my presentation on these 4 areas and just kind of touch on what the guidebook has as far as these 4 topics go. So I'm going to start with climate impacts to trails. Across all regions and types of trails, climate change threatens to reduce access to trails, impact users' comfort and experiences, and force trail operators to adapt their construction and maintenance programs. Climate change impacts to trails are both physical and economic and often have lasting impacts. In this section, I'm going to walk through a few ways that climate change is affecting trails. Before I jump into the specific impacts, I do want to just mention that, the first step to creating resilient trails is to really understand the vulnerability of a trail or trail system, which can vary by region and context. There is a lot of data and research to be found out there, including useful sources like this one that's featured on the screen, the Climate Explorer, which was developed by USGS, NASA, NOAA, and other well-known agencies. It allows you to look up climate impacts by specific geographic area, and it's one of many tools and research-based guidelines that the guidebook features. So climate change has brought more frequent storms and heavier precipitation, early snowmelt, and more destructive hurricanes. Many trails and greenways are located along rivers, streams, and coastlines, making them particularly vulnerable to flooding, both seasonal and tidal, and permanent flooding as well. Flooding can impact trails in multiple ways. Sediment, it can deposit sediment and debris over trails. The picture on the left shows this. Water itself, either through velocity or standing water, can damage trail surfacing and paving. And on a more drastic scale, flooding can undercut the base course, blow out culverts, and damage structures, such as the picture on the right. The increased frequency and intensity of flooding creates a big maintenance burden for agencies, including short and long-term maintenance for cleanup, and repairs, and the work of managing temporary and permanent closures for trail safety. Sea level rise has a similar impact to flooding, with the added impact of erosion and inundation that shrinks shorelines over time. This photo, which I think is amazing, is from the Mill Valley Sausalito Path in Marin County, California. It's part of the Bay Trail, which is a 500-mile envisioned network of trails encircling the San Francisco Bay. This part of the path passes through a marsh preserve. It floods several times a year during king tides and high tides, with storm surges. As you can see in this picture, pretty amazing photo there. The trail managers have recognized that parts of the trail eventually will be displaced permanently by rising sea level. You can see the image on the right is what the sea level rise is predicted into the future. So these people's heads are underwater. So the image on the left shows plans to relocate this trail, realign it, and elevate the path several feet where on the edge of the marsh where the trail is located. So great example of just proactive planning in the face of rising sea level. Wildfires is another threat to trails. On both the east and west coast of the US, fire frequency has doubled in the last 10 years and has quadrupled in the Great Plains region. Fire causes damage to trails and trail structures and amenities like bridges and benches. And then the damage to trees and vegetation is most obvious from wildfires, but damage to root systems of trees and plants, which hold soil in place, makes erosion a secondary hazard. And then rainstorms that follow carry loosened soil and sediment into water systems, creating downstream impacts to water quality. And then extreme heat events also are on the rise, such as the heat wave of 2021 that hit my home state of Washington State, where this picture was taken. It resulted in over 100 heat-related deaths throughout the state. These events are becoming increasingly common throughout the US with climate change. So there's obvious human health impacts related to extreme heat. And then there's damage that can also happen to trail surfaces, particularly asphalt, which I'll touch on here in a little bit. And then lastly, as far as impacts go, is the expanding vernal window and how that impacts trails. The vernal window, or the winter to spring transition, is a key period for seasonally snow-covered forested ecosystems. So think shorter winters and earlier and longer springs. And scientists project that climate change will lengthen the vernal window significantly over the next 80 years. So for trails, this may mean failing vegetation, invasive species, and possibly more pests like ticks that create nuisances and hazards to people using trails. Perhaps the most visible impact of the vernal window shift is longer mud seasons, which can damage trail surfacing through extended drainage cycles, erosion, and trampled vegetation from people diverting off primary trails. So lots of impacts of trails, not a rosy picture, but I'm going to touch on some solutions to mitigate these impacts. But first, Christine, if you wouldn't mind queuing up the first polling question that I had.
Yes. All right. So the question is, what's the top climate impact affecting trails in your community? And so we have a bunch of options here. More days when heat, smoke, or poor air quality can impact trail users, wildfires, heavy rains, flooding, king tides, mud season, a longer mud season, increased pressure from insects and diseases, causing vegetation and human health hazards, and unsure. So top climate impact. So this is a one answer response. I'll give it another moment because I know that this is a hefty question. So I'm going to give folks a moment. Okay. We're still getting responses in. Okay, here, I'm going to go ahead and cut her off here so we can keep moving and share the results. 46% heavy rain events, flooding, king tides. That's not surprising to me. 24% more days when heat, smoke, or poor air quality can impact trail users. And then a smattering of the rest. But I think those are the two big responses.
Yeah.
Michael,
yeah.
I'm going to turn it back to you.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that. Yeah, not a lot of surprises there. So yeah, there's a lot of risks and impacts to trails. So now I want to talk about how the guide addresses this and provides guidance on planning, design, and management solutions for climate change impacts to trails. And I do want to just mention the guidebook assumes that sustainable design and construction practices are a given, and it's really intended to supplement the many guidebooks that are out there related to sustainable design and construction techniques, and provide additional information that's specifically focused on addressing climate impacts. So with that, primary is related to grading and drainage. They're really key tools for managing flooding, storm surges, and sea level rise. Minimizing impacts to wetlands and streams and stream restoration using green infrastructure are important systemic approaches to resilient trails. And climate adaptive construction methods for trails at the site scale include using specialized structures and designs. Couple examples here on the screen. The image on the left is an example from the Houston bayous. This region experienced massive flooding and hurricanes between the years of 2016 and 2020, and continues to experience these events. And the region and the city recognized it as a continuous issue, especially with rapid urbanization. So the city embraced the bayous that are throughout the region as a way to improve the area's physical and environmental and economic resilience. The Houston Parks Board, which is the managing agency of the trail system, removed structures from the floodway, expanded stormwater detention and infiltration, and developed trails that provide recreation, transportation, and community health benefits. The city also developed a climate adaptive cross-section, which you can see in that drawing on the left. It incorporated a turn down, which is a type of footing that's 1.5 to 3 feet deep, and it protects the underside of the trails from being washed out by flooding and stabilizes the surface. They also changed their trail spec from asphalt to 6-inch concrete to be more resilient to flooding. So addressing wildfire threats, this is a great case study example from the guidebook on the Bear Creek Greenway, which is located in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon. The 2020 Almeda fire burned about 3,200 acres and destroyed 2,500 residences, damaged a significant portion of the trail. The trail, which was bordered by flammable, invasive vegetation, allowed the fire to spread quickly along the ground and get into the canopy of the native riparian vegetation along the creek, which is an important salmon-bearing stream. The damage had the potential for catastrophic impacts to water quality and salmon habitat. And so the managing agencies quickly mobilized to address the water quality risk by mapping the damage in order to prioritize areas for remedial seeding and treatments to hold the soil in place. They even engaged the high school cross-country team to get out there and plant seedlings in a quick fashion. Since then, local and regional governments, acknowledging that warmer and drier climate means larger fires, have come together to develop a multidisciplinary management plan that includes fire, police, and natural resources staff. The plan also includes a more adaptive or active approach to managing invasive vegetation along the corridor to suppress fuel and prevent future fires. This is a really, really cool trail in the Coachella Valley of California, the CV Link Trail. And it really responds to extreme heat. It follows the flood control channel for the White River in the Coachella Valley, and is intended to provide high capacity pathway for pedestrians, bicyclists, and low-speed electric vehicles. When completed, it will span 40 miles, so there's a great need to protect public health due to temperatures that are often above 100 degrees, and in the summer can sometimes reach 120 degrees. So the trail was designed to withstand use by heavy vehicles that service the flood control channel, in addition to extreme heat conditions. The primary trail surface is concrete that is 8 inches thick and 14 feet wide. And yeah, unlike asphalt, asphalt becomes brittle in hot climates, particularly when there's not a lot of regular heavy automobile traffic on it. So concrete is definitely a more stable surface over time in these types of climates. The really cool feature of the CV Link is these shade structures that are pictured in the image. The structures are angled and located to provide shade for the path in the late afternoons of summer when the heat is the most intense. As I touched on a bit earlier, climate impacts to trails can result in significant maintenance burdens on agencies. Maintenance is really first about safety of trail users and then about protecting the assets. Covered some of this in some of the previous examples, but really is key to resilient trails is designing for maintenance. So understanding the materials, the durability, and the best practices around stormwater management, and then also conducting more frequent inspections, and ideally addressing issues promptly as inspections are completed and before additional damage occurs. I have another polling question here just to ask about um, strategies that your community may be making to address climate impacts to your trails.
Okay, folks. Same thing. What steps have your community or organization taken to address climate impact on trails? And I'll give you guys a few moments here to look over these options. Okay, I think I'm going to go ahead and close her up here and share the results. So it's all across the board. This is very interesting. I think the most definitely being gather data on current issues and future risks, followed by adapting the design of a trail or trail features.
That's great. Great to see that action is being taken. And I highly encourage you, if you haven't checked out this guidebook yet, to check it out because it will give you some more ideas on how you can be proactive around addressing these impacts. So I want to touch a bit on trails as a climate solution. This is so getting away from climate adaptation and towards climate mitigation. So I think a lot of us are aware that trails are an obvious way to reduce transportation-related emissions and mitigate climate impacts. Integrating trails into local and regional transportation networks allows the conversion of shorter trips, under 5 miles, from driving to walking, and biking and e-bikes are making it possible for people to commute even longer distances than that. It's a great example of integrated regional trail system, the Oakleaf Trail in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's a multi-use trail system that covers over 135 miles, connecting throughout the metro area. The extent of this network allows people to make active transportation a choice over driving for daily travel, and also provides a means for first responder operations during emergencies. Many cities and regions and regional agencies across the US are focused on building out similar regional trail systems, but also means as a way for transportation, but also as a way to provide more equitable access to green space and create redundant systems for emergency response. And thinking beyond trails as paths alone, trail corridors can be part of a larger ecosystem restoration effort that helps to manage stormwater and sequester and store carbon. This is the Gamble's Mill Eco Corridor located near the University of Richmond, Virginia, which marries trail building with stream restoration to resolve stormwater management challenges while strengthening campus and community active transportation connections. The project restores Little West End Creek to manage stormwater and flooding from increased storm events within the stream floodplain. It also expands the capacity of the stream to capture stormwater and filter pollutants using vegetation, reducing phosphorus loads and sediment traveling downstream to the James River. That's a really great example. And then just want to also mention that the guidebook is really focused on pursuing equity in trail planning and design. It discusses a variety of strategies for doing this and recognizes that historically underserved communities often lack access to trails where they live, feel unwelcome, uncomfortable, or unsafe, or even may be prevented from using trails due to physical barriers such as poorly maintained trail surfaces. Climate change impacts have also been shown to disproportionately impact disadvantaged groups as well, and trail planning and design can help mitigate this. But at the same time, the development of new trails can create displacement through green gentrification and people relocating to escape or to avoid climate change and climate change related disasters. These are really complex issues that must be addressed in all stages of planning for climate resilient trails. And the guide discusses various strategies for pursuing equity, from inclusive planning processes to design and meeting the needs of specific populations, and communications and engagement. It highlights some great examples from Portland metro area focused on trail prioritization that takes into account equitable access to trails, as well as King County, Washington, which is focused on providing equitable access to parks and trails, among many other examples. So want to skip forward to trails as emergency response. This is a really important piece of the guidebook, though I'm not going to spend as much time on it in this presentation. But there is a clear tie between climate resiliency and being prepared for and able to respond to climate-related emergencies and disasters. Trails have a role to play in emergency management and response. They, as I've mentioned earlier, they can provide a redundant system for emergency responders if, for example, roads are congested or otherwise impassable. They also provide access to community lifelines like hospitals, food and shelter, energy, communication. So really, they can play a really important role to emergency response. And really, integrating trails into emergency response plans is a really important thing for communities to be doing. This is a great case study example from Butte County, California. And in response to the Camp Fire in 2018, which really caused tremendous devastation across the county, and destroyed nearly 95% of the town of Paradise. Following that fire, a long-term recovery plan was completed, which identified several emergency preparedness projects, including an interconnected 43-mile network of paths along the main ingress and egress routes in the town of Paradise. Local fire and police departments are very supportive of these types of projects, which has helped to strengthen working relationship between local public works and emergency response. There are a few other examples included in the guide from New York City in response to the Hurricane Sandy, Berkeley, California, which is focused on FEMA fire prevention and a safety grant that was received there. And then also in Portland, Oregon, where bike emergency transportation routes have been identified. That is all I have for you this morning. I look forward to turning it over to Sarah. And I just want to mention, if you just search your browser Trails as a Resilient Infrastructure Guidebook, it will pop up first thing, and you'll be able to get this guidebook. And I hope that it furthers your efforts to create more resilient trails in your community. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I will pull up my presentation shortly. Okay. So hi, as Jim mentioned before, I am Sarah Wawema, and I am the Climate Project Manager at Trust for Public Land. And today I'll be talking about our trails commitment, as well as a little bit more on the health, equity, and community benefits of trails and open space. So for those who don't know, Trust for Public Land is a 50-year-old organization, and we're one of the largest park and conservation nonprofits in the US. Our mission is to create parks and protect land for people. So we believe that access to the outdoors is a fundamental human need and essential to our health and well-being. And of course, we see trails as an extension of this commitment and as linear parks. So we have 30 offices around the country, and over the past 50 years, we've completed over 5,300 parks, trails, and schoolyard projects. We've generated over $94 billion in public funds and protected close to 4 million acres of land.
Hey, can you hold on one second? Sorry, I think can you go up to display settings?
Oh, I see.
And hit Just display settings over to the right. Keep going. Your cursor is not moving. Display settings. It says show taskbar, display settings, and slideshow.
Yes. Oh, I see.
Okay. Hit display settings. And then
Okay,
swap.
thank you. Is
Sure.
that it?
Yep.
Great. Thank you. Oop. Having some issues. Sorry, 1 second. I'm going to try this again. Stop sharing for a second. Okay, I'm just 1 second. It's going to be a little bit awkward, but I'm just going to be looking to the right just so I hit all of my notes. Thank you for bearing with me here. So to pick up where I left off, we believe that park inequity is a primary driver for the work that we do. It's at the center of the work that we do. So we know that parks and trails can help improve community resiliency, as well as improve public health. But the issue is that not all communities have equal access to parks and trails. And a lot of the same times, these are the same communities that are the most vulnerable to the climate crisis, as well as experiencing heightened levels of public health crises as well. So a couple years ago, Trust for Public Land looked into park equity across 14,000 communities in the US. And we found that parks serving a majority of people of color are half as large and serve nearly 5 times more people as parks that serve a majority of white populations. We also found that parks serving majority low-income households are 4 times smaller than parks that serve a majority of high-income households. And I also think it's important to note that park equity and these health disparities that we're seeing are symptoms of systemic disenfranchisement and disinvestment that these same communities have been facing for decades. So I'll start with a trivia question for you all about park equity. So according to TPL's ParkServe analysis, how many people do you think in the US don't have a park within a 10-minute walk of their home? So we have 20 million, 65 million, 100 million, or 140 million. And Christine, I'll wait for your cue before I
There we
reveal
go.
the answer.
It's loaded.
Great.
I love these trivia questions. Give it another moment here. While we're waiting, I am going to post in the chat box a link to the guidebook that Michael was talking about, just so y'all know. Okay. Okay. Our responses are slowing down, so we're going to go ahead and end the poll.
Okay.
So this is what the people are thinking. 40% say 100 million people in the US don't have a park within the 10-minute walk. And then 33% comes in second, saying 140 million. Boy, we are very pessimistic people here, but probably for good reason. So tell us, what is it? What's the answer?
Yep, you guys are correct. A lot of you guys are correct. It is 100 million people. Which is good. I mean, planners tend to be kind of pessimistic. It kind of works out.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. And this is a staggering number. This is an unacceptable number. And I also wanted to note that of 100 million of these people, 28 million of these people are children that can't go to a park within 10 minutes of the home where they live. So that's all to say that we really see addressing park inequity as a way to also address these larger issues, well, these other issues of the climate crisis, as well as improving public health improving community and social cohesion, as well as promoting equity. So we really feel like we have an obligation to address park inequity, not because parks are just a nice amenity that we get to have, but because they're essential to our own health as well as the health of our planet. So then to talk briefly about climate when it comes to parks and trails, I know Michael talked about this a little bit. The way that the vision that we have at TPL is that parks and trails are important to cooling urban heat island effects through neighborhood greening, absorbing stormwater runoff using green infrastructure, connecting neighborhoods through active transportation projects, and protecting against coastal and riverine flooding by providing physical barriers. So then to our next and last trivia question. So the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, otherwise known as NOAA, conducted research in Baltimore, DC, and Boulder, Colorado that showed during heat waves, forested parks can be as much as 5, 12, 15, or 17 degrees cooler than nearby neighborhoods that lack adequate green space.
I will give it a few more moments. Okay. There appears to be a clear winner. I'm going to end our poll. Let's see what the people say. Okay, 55% of us are saying that forested parks can be as much as 12 degrees cooler than nearby neighborhoods that lack adequate green space, followed by 15 degrees. Okay, tell us.
Okay, well, I'm
What's the
happy to
answer?
report that the answer is 17 degrees.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Yes, yeah. So of course, 17 degrees, another staggering number. And this is the difference between experiencing a mildly uncomfortable warm event versus a life-threatening heat wave. And it's so sad to think that your zip code determines whether or not you can afford to live next to a public amenity that can impact your life in such a big way. So this study is, as well as claims by the EPA, show that urban greening is one of the most effective strategies when it comes to keeping our communities cooler. So while it's not the only strategy that we have in our wheelhouse, it definitely is a piece of the puzzle. So with that, I'll move on to the health benefits of parks and open space and trails, specifically mental health and behavioral health. So more green space is associated with fewer depressive and burnout symptoms, lower sales of mood and anxiety disorder medications, less postpartum depression, less emotional distress during the COVID pandemic, and lower suicide rates. And then in terms of physical health, I won't go through all of these here, but just to name a few, contact with nature is associated with lower blood pressure, reduced diabetes, better eyesight, as well as better birth outcomes, which I wanted to call out just because in the US, pregnant people have some of the worst birth outcomes in the developed world. And this is particularly important for people of color that are giving birth, especially Black people in the US. So infants born to Black people are over twice as likely to die relative to white people, and Black people are 3 times more likely to die from a pregnancy-related cause than white people, according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. And so with that, I'll move on to talk about our trails projects now that we have a good idea of the benefits of trails. And of course, CPL has a myriad of trail projects throughout the US, but I called these 2 out in particular because they have a strong focus on climate impacts through providing space for carbon-free transportation, and also as a strategy to achieve Vision Zero, meaning that they can help their communities get to a point where traffic fatalities are reduced to 0, as well as connecting communities to provide economic and health benefits. So TPL has three focal areas when it comes to trails. So this includes urban and suburban trails, trails as rural revitalization, and national trails systems. So the first project here is the Florida Gulf Coast Trail, which cost about $20 million and spans across the 7-county region in Florida, including Hillsborough, Pinellas, Manatee, Sarasota, Charlotte, Lee, and Collier counties. And this will create a 400+ mile trail system that will serve 70,000 residents, according to TPL's 10-minute walk analysis. And then I also want to mention the Long Island Greenway located in the state of New York. This is a $114 million project spanning statewide from Buffalo, Plattsburgh to Montauk, and it'll be a nearly 200-mile greenway, expected to bring in 34 million annual visitors and eventually serving 27 communities once it's done, again, according to TPL's internal analysis. So TPL was the lead partner in all of these projects, supporting overall project management, geospatial or GIS route and planning, land acquisition in Florida, contracting for feasibility studies and preliminary designs, writing grants. And we were also able to bring in our conservation finance team to help develop new sources of local funding so that similar projects like these can be funded into the future, and also to provide funding for these existing projects. We were also involved in community engagement and working alongside residents to create friends of groups so that residents can become advocates for trails in their community. So to get these projects done, TPL works with a diverse range of stakeholders, including community organizations, by providing technical assistance, whether it be real estate and public funding expertise, as well as geospatial or economic tools. And we work with local governments, for example, to create and implement master plans, as well as federal and state governments to divert funds towards trails projects. And lastly, working alongside other nonprofits. So now I wanted to dive into a case study, specifically the 5 Mile Creek Greenbelt located in Dallas, Texas. And I wanted to start by giving some context to the area. And as you can see on the map here, the 5 Mile Creek watershed is located in southern Dallas, south of downtown Dallas. In this area, 54% of residents don't have a park. One of the zip codes in this area has the least amounts of green space nationwide. 187,000 residents live here, including 57,000 children. 61% of residents are Black and 33% are Latino, so it's a majority community of color, and 51% of households are low income. In terms of health, people in this community are facing asthma, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, obesity, and depression, to name a few of their health concerns. And in terms of climate, TPL used the Dallas Smart Growth tool, which is another tool made in-house, to show that this is a prime location to protect and improve stream corridors, to provide better connectivity and pedestrian safety, and to address urban heat. So this all culminated in the 5 Mile Creek Beltway, which is a 17-mile greenbelt trail that will connect to 3 new parks, all of which TPL have a hand in building. So this will connect to 17 existing parks, several hospitals, 2 colleges, 2 light rail stations, and nearly 200,000 residents. And this trail is also planned to connect with 2 other major trails to create a Dallas-wide network of trails. So speaking of the 3 new parks that are being created, one of them is done, and this is the South Oak Cliff Renaissance Park. This will include, in terms of the green infrastructure, this will include 2 bioretention rain gardens that'll capture 6,700 gallons of stormwater at each event, as well as 97,000 gallons annually. There'll also be solar-powered lights on site. And TPL is working alongside the Nature Conservancy to install more of these natural stormwater management tools at the other two parks that are still under construction or in the design process, as well as throughout the trail system. And I also wanted to call out some of the green infrastructure performance metrics that were used in assessing the viability of the 5 Mile Creek Beltway to show that we were thinking holistically about the climate impacts that this trail project could have. So in terms of funding, this of course was no small task. The trail is estimated at costing about $70 million. And currently TPL has raised about $28.5 million in funds for this project. It's an engineering puzzle involving multiple highway, rail, and creek crossings. And so far, most of the funds come from government and state funding, but I also wanted to call out the private foundation of money that is supporting this project. And while it makes up a relatively smaller amount of the budget, in this project and in other TPL projects, we've seen that this private foundation money can be leveraged much more quicker than state and federal or government funds, and allows a level of flexibility. And in the case of this Dallas Greenbelt, it meant that the project was able to get off the ground. When the project was first started and being shopped around, it didn't gain support from City Council, who thought that it was basically not worth the investment, that it was too expensive. We don't know where we would be without this private foundation money, and this is something that we've seen in other TPL projects. But things are looking a bit brighter now. The project has the support from the last 2 mayors of Dallas, and this includes the sitting mayor of Dallas. And to talk a little bit more about advocacy, TPL has created a community committee specifically to address neighborhood wants and needs in each trail segment. TPL also worked with the city of Dallas to adopt the 5 Mile Creek Urban Greenbelt Master Plan in 2019, which allowed TPL to purchase 125 acres, which will eventually make up the 3 parks that will be alongside the trail. So, and while there's a lot to celebrate when it comes to this Greenbelt, I also wanted to talk about gentrification within the context of this project, as well as within the context of Dallas, and to acknowledge that large parks built in historically marginalized urban areas can contribute to gentrification and ultimately contribute to displacement. And within the context of Dallas, according to the Dallas Morning News, almost 40% of the homes that were being built in Dallas were bought by house flippers, investors, developers, and builders, meaning that there's less housing stock for community members who are trying to put down their roots in their community. And projects like 5 Mile Creek and the Trinity River Corridor project, which is a similar project located in Dallas, have the potential to increase the cost of living and drastically change the built environment. So even if residents can still afford to live in their neighborhoods, it can be very alienating to see your community go through such drastic changes that you were not consulted about. And suddenly the place that you've lived your whole life does not reflect your history or your culture overall. So to address green gentrification and displacement, I've laid out a few of the strategies that both Dallas and TPL are using, but the through line that you can see through all of them is that community engagement needs to be extensive and meaningful. It needs to start as early as possible, and it needs to continue throughout the length of the project. So the same 5 Mile Creek Urban Greenbelt Master Plan that I mentioned before emphasizes outreach, education, visioning, and collaboration. Dallas has also adopted a 2022 racial equity plan that identifies neighborhoods at risk for gentrification, increases the number of affordable housing units, and looks to address the home ownership gap problem along racial lines, where only 27% of Black residents own their homes versus 56% of white residents. And this all also led to the Dallas Anti-Displacement Toolkit, which is looking at more measured responses to gentrification and hopefully to avoid displacement. At TPL, we're also focusing on developing equitable development plans as part of the project planning process. And as part of this, we're also partnering with workforce housing entities And this is most prevalent in our Story Mill Park project in Boston, Montana, and the India Basin Waterfront Park in San Francisco. So that concludes the end of my presentation, and I'll be around for any questions at the end.
Sorry, my mouse died. Gone rogue. All right, can y'all see my screen? Looks good. Thank you so much. My name is Mikey Goralnik. I'm a planner and a landscape architect at Great Springs Project. I'm located in Austin, Texas, but our project area is regional, which I'll talk about in a second. So folks throughout the I-35 corridor and the Edwards Aquifer recharge area. Yeah, I'm super grateful for the opportunity to talk to you about what we're working on, and also to share the stage, share the bill, I guess, with Michael and Sarah, and who are doing really cool work that's really inspiring. And I think we'll see probably pretty closely aligned with some of what I'm going to talk about today. Did the screen just change?
Yes, it did.
All right, cool. Okay, so Great Springs Project, GSP, are let's say engaging with several sort of key regional imperatives. I guess an interesting maybe context to place here is that Michael presenting these precedents on trail and resiliency projects from throughout the country. Sarah also presenting this whole range of different efforts that TPL is engaged in or is leading. And I think a cool way to look at how GSP can contribute to this conversation is that we're looking at the exact same topics and questions in a very discrete geography that has both regional and highly local issues that related to trail access and resiliency that we're explicitly trying to target. And in our region, the I-35 corridor between San Antonio and Austin, which is also the Edwards Aquifer Recharge Zone, this is one of the fastest growing, and by some metrics, the single fastest growing megapolitan area in the country. And that sort of, I want to say rampant, but explosive population growth puts a huge strain on natural resources and inbuilt resources. And in particular, the loss of open space and areas to support the health of the aquifer, which is kind of this indicator species, which has standalone value as the source of drinking water for millions of people, not to mention this essential resource for non-human animals, but is also sort of an indicator species for a healthy ecosystem more generally. This entire area has evolved to be nurtured by and supported by the Edwards Aquifer. And so what happens below ground has this really discrete, is really discretely reflected in what takes place in the ecosystems above ground. And in our region, and certainly in our state, these changes or these sort of threats are born, have an impact on the ability for folks to access the experiences that make this area attractive, many of the experiences that make this area attractive in the first place. So statewide, less than 4% of our public land is accessible to the public. And in an area with the sort of rampant and explosive population growth that we're seeing, issues related to access disparities and affordability are amplified as more and more of our developable area is altered. And that's true regionally, but like Sarah and Michael have indicated, so if you look more closely at different balances at the neighborhood level, that throughout our region, those disparities are even starker and more of an imperative for a regional organization that can promote accessible public spaces that are not only close to where people live, but provide connections to the places that people want to go. And obviously, in the context of a changing climate, where drought and extreme heat and major rain events and floods can undermine efforts locally to promote accessibility and to support the health of an ecosystem that is extremely vulnerable to not only population growth and development, but significant swings in temperature in all kinds of climatic patterns. The ability for an organization to grapple with these issues regionally is extremely important as we work together to promote both accessibility and adaptation through trails. So that is what our approach is. Our nonprofit organization works to achieve sort of a two-tiered approach to solving this issue. We are working to promote what is considered essentially a national park-sized corridor of protected lands above the Edwards, in the Edwards Aquifer Recharge Zone and above the aquifer that sort of gives this area life, and to connect those protected lands with 100-mile interconnected trail network so that you can hike, bike, run from the Alamo to the Capitol. So we're working towards this regional vision of a mega trail network that is explicitly targeting an ambitious conservation agenda of over 50,000 additional acres of conserved land, specifically that supports the health of our aquifer. And so our approach, so we work on projects throughout the corridor that have a whole sort of run the gamut from not only in terms of context, but also in terms of emphasis. So many of our projects are intended explicitly to promote access, and this is trails, shared use path, you name it, basically any kind of active transportation or recreational trail infrastructure that in many cases may not have a direct relationship to conservation or ecosystem health. And similarly, we do work on other projects that are primarily really sort of high profile or super strategic conservation projects that are explicitly intended, or at least primarily intended, to support landscape health and aquifer recharge. And in some cases, some of the conservation projects that we work on either have limited or depending on the context, maybe no anticipated public access. And both of these types of projects are important. But what we're most in sort of the bulk of our project work, and I think what we're mainly going to be talking about today, are projects that do both, that are intended to promote access while explicitly supporting the health of our landscape and our aquifer. And the sort of interplay between those types of projects that are both intended to support access and intended to support climate adaptation and mitigation activities that benefit the aquifer and benefit the aquifer's ecosystem are what we're going to sort of like to explore and talk a little bit about today, and especially in our Q&A session. And I think there are really kind of 7 types of projects that communicate different relationships between access and conservation or adaptation that GSP is involved in. I'm going to focus on just 3 of them today, and I think it's worth noting and kind of fun to see that basically these are all the same types of projects, at least in my view, that Michael and Sarah are talking about. So the sort of the relationships that between conservation and adaptation and resiliency and trails and public access are sort of maybe consistent or there's a through line between these essentially 3 different agencies that have, or 3 different groups, 1 a consultant, 2 that are nonprofits, one nonprofit that has a very specific like local or regional emphasis. So I don't know, I think that's for me to hear about what Michael and Sarah are presenting on and have it resonate so much with what I'm working on too is affirming and I think optimistic, makes me feel optimistic, even though I am a planner. So I think the first way is the sort of global view is that our So our trail plan, our vision for the priority trail projects that we work on and that we will continue to work on over the coming decades is a plan that is fundamentally influenced by values related to ecosystem enhancement, conservation, and essentially climate change adaptation and resiliency. So we adopted a formal trails plan in 2022. Worth noting that it is currently undergoing an update, but this plan determines the route that or in some cases routes that our trail will follow to connect the Alamo and the Capitol and San Marcos and New Braunfels, where the other two great springs in our region are located. And though it is a trail, or I guess knowing that it is a trail, it's not just a sort of a distillation of other active transportation or recreational trail plans. It's a plan that is directly, it's a vision that is directly influenced by these ecological planning imperatives. So first, prior to looking at other transportation or trail planning documents or processes in our region, we started to look at environmental considerations, ecological considerations related to water, heat, habitat, geology, hydrology, and the other sort of a whole suite of pressing ecological concerns that we need to be engaging with through our trail project. So I mentioned a few examples, but just to look under the hood a little bit at what our analysis entailed, we determined regionally where these sort of karst features, which are essentially these main lines into the aquifer, where when water passes over, it's absorbed through limestone into the bedrock, where it fills up the aquifer. Habitat areas, which are essential, the sort of key habitat locations for endangered species or important indicator species like the golden sheep warbler. Sensitive landscapes throughout the corridor, specifically in this instance, steep slopes, but also wetlands and floodplain corridors. Buffers around not just the Great Springs, but also the next tier of major springs in our area. And then less maybe from a ecological standpoint, but from a conservation standpoint, we looked at areas where there are large parcels that are primed for conservation that can contribute the most through bang for your buck, to determine locations to avoid, locations to link, and provide, I guess, other information, other layer of information to consider in developing our route. Then we brought in data related to this, priorities for recreational trails and active transportation and other connectivity approaches that have been applied throughout, the 10 city, 4 county, 2 MPO region that we serve. So rather than letting these decisions, many of which are shaped by ecological considerations, be the sort of sole decision maker in determining our route, we made sure that our process was strategic about the landscape considerations that we are trying to serve in order to determine what our connectivity and active transportation and recreational trail emphases would be. So here is our route to connect the 4 Great Springs from the Alamo to the Capitol. Again, I mentioned that there is an update taking place. So you can see currently the route ends at Barton Springs here in Austin. That's essentially the case still, but there is a T3 segment that goes east, which we'll talk about actually a little bit later on. But that we haven't updated our maps yet, so they haven't been able to include that graphic. But cliffhanger or teaser that change is coming. But in this way, by sort of going through from the jump, having this synthetic analytical approach to determining what our route is, which incorporates these ecological imperatives, we sort of set our trail project up to be as responsive to the whole sort of gamut of resiliency issues that we're all kind of aware of, and then I know that Michael and Sarah provided a lot of detail on. The next kind of typology of projects that I think are compelling for how our trail effort is engaging with resiliency issues and regional ecological issues generally is okay. So we know, and we know that trails can be planned and designed in ways that the impact of a trail in a sensitive landscape can be mitigated. And then Michael provided some really great examples of how trail implementation can take place, or trail, from a design or a siting or a construction or materiality perspective. Trails can be done in ways that that don't, or that have at least less of an impact on sensitive landscapes. And we certainly practice those priorities, but we're also exploring other opportunities that our trail work and our trail building can actually tangibly contribute to healthy ecosystems, and not just not have a bad impact, but actually be the thing that supports a healthy landscape. And this, I think Michael just definitely provided some good kind of instances of this, where trails can provide access to sensitive landscapes that where invasive species removal work is taking place, or other sort of far-flung areas that require human intervention to maintain their vitality. Trails can also be implemented in ways that support erosion control and can enhance habitat. But here you see an image of a wildlife overpass here in San Antonio, not actually part of our trail corridor, but a really compelling example of a co-use trail crossing that supports that enables both humans and non-humans to safely get across big roads. So this is an area where our entity is getting involved to identify opportunities where our recreational trail can support habitat connectivity for various animals that live in and are threatened, live in the aquifer recharge area, support a healthy ecosystem in our region, and whose migratory patterns and behaviors are significantly influenced not only by the rampant development patterns in our area, but also by changes in climate. So here you see a map of our trail corridor overlaid with wildlife crossing hotspots. And so this is the sort of predominant data set that exists for this information in our area. It's the TxDOT crash incident reporting data set, which is famously underreported. There's, not everybody is telling TxDOT every time they hit a deer or an armadillo. But this is sort of the best that we have, and even with this, you can see that it's dangerous for wildlife to cross, and I think from any recreational trail user's perspective, it's obviously dangerous to cross those same roads. So we're looking at opportunities to pun intended, I guess, bridge that gap and provide connectivity both for human recreational trail users and non-human creatures that we share the aquifer recharge area with. This is strategic. This is the right thing to do. This is aligned with our mission. It's also strategic from a cost benefit perspective. The cost of, depending on what metric you're using, but the cost of an animal vehicle collision can be over $40,000 per incident. And as you can see here, there's tens of thousands of incidents. Well, in this map, not tens of thousands, but statewide, tens of thousands of incidents of these crashes. So they start to scale that up and understand the amount of the financial value, the economic impact of animal vehicle collisions. It makes your trail projects, which can promote safer crossings for wildlife and recreational users, start to pencil out a little bit more. So this is an area where we're currently engaged in developing, looking at these specific crossing corridors with the State Transportation Agency and researchers at our area institutions to develop projects that are develop crossings that benefit both humans and non-human users in our area. We're studying this through a couple different mechanisms. We have a feasibility study from the TxDOT's Texas Department of Transportation's Transportation Alternative Program, which will scratch the surface on this, but we're also pursuing a dedicated analysis of this specific topic to evaluate the entire corridor for targeted areas for co-use crossings and develop sort of preliminary designs for both priority crossings, but also a more standardized kit of part crossings that will allow us to affordably implement co-use crossings throughout the corridor. And then the last project I'll talk about, and we don't have a ton of time, so I might just breeze through this one a little bit, are opportunities for trails to catalyze green infrastructure projects. And this is well covered by Sarah and Michael, so I don't feel too bad about running through it so we can have more time for Q&A. But our specific application of this sort of methodology or this framework here takes place in South Austin in eastern Travis County. We're along the Williamson Creek and the Onion Creek corridors, where we're working with a group of public, a whole diverse partnership of entities, including neighborhood environmental justice practitioners, partners at universities, public agencies, and other nonprofits that are working in a variety of different topic areas in this space to kind of use our trail project, which would be nearly 17 miles of recreational trail and active transportation corridor along these riparian areas from Williamson, the intersection of Williamson Creek and another big trail called the Violet Crown Trail, with the confluence of Onion Creek and the Colorado River in eastern Travis County. Using our trail project kind of as a Trojan horse for green infrastructure projects that are explicitly engaging with environmental justice issues that Sarah described so well. So these areas, as you can see here, the multiple neighborhoods along the Onion Creek and Williamson Creek corridor are themselves FEMA or Army Corps of Engineer buyout areas where historically Black and brown neighborhoods used to exist, and in some cases still do exist, but in diminished or alienated or isolated conditions. So our trail project provides recreational and mobility benefits throughout the region, but with specific emphasis on these neighborhoods that not only have experienced trauma and displacement from climate-related catastrophes, but are also continuing to face displacement risk from the sort of gentrification generally, but potentially also green gentrification from projects like this one. We're doing so, and so we're doing so in ways that help to implement green infrastructure projects to mitigate the risk of flooding on those neighborhoods in the future, helping to ensure, so through investment in projects like reforestation, riparian buffers that prevent flooding from riparian flooding from having an impact on riparian neighborhoods, and rain gardens at the residential scale to mitigate the impact of flooding in the future, but also to empower and uplift efforts by local community members to participate in and be stewards of and have access to the riparian corridor and the trail network in our community generally. Doing so in ways to increase representation and sense of belonging in the outdoor environments that are adjacent to and connected by these this network of riparian trails, and to activate trails and outdoor areas that have been sort of planned and designed and programmed with through leadership and through decision making that is local and that is reflective of those communities that are being served by the trail and that have that continue to face displacement from those forces that I've mentioned. So yeah, let me wrap that up, and if anybody has any specific questions about that project, we can talk about it, but it'd be great if we could have some Q&A to flesh out some of the details. Thanks.
Wonderful. If everyone wants to go ahead and jump back on, I know we don't have a ton of time, and Mikey, I'm sure you cut off part of your presentation. So if you do have questions that we don't get to, you can always email me and I can get you the contact or forward your information to our panelists who can then answer your questions directly. Okay, so let's just run through as many as we can here.
Yeah, and before we start, let me
yes.
just mention Brendan Shane from Trust for Public Land is going to be joining us in the Q&A. So
Thank
we
you.
had not previously introduced him, but he
Right.
was one of the
He's just hanging out here.
key players in helping us shape this webinar. So.
Okay, first question, this is a good one. Can a municipality benefit from integrating the recreation and trail plans with their hazard mitigation plan? Who wants to take this first?
I'm happy to jump in on that. I mean, absolutely, yes. I think some of the examples I shared and some more examples that are in the FHWA guide underscore the advantages of doing this. And so I think there's some good examples to go by in the guide. And I think, yeah, to the extent that those two planning efforts can be integrated really benefits both of them. So, yeah.
Anyone else have anything on that?
I just say
Mikey?
a big thing there for a big opportunity for that is in the a topic that Michael covered that we're also involved in is leveraging trails for evacuation routes. So and not only does that benefit does that make your trail more multi-beneficial, but also it makes your trail more fundable. So if you're able to tie your recreational trail or your active transportation trail to something that is seen as a public safety benefit, there's a lot more money available for those types of investments than there are for recreational trails.
Yep.
And I'd just add that, many trails in creeks and watersheds that you've seen, we have some, they're specifically designed to berm to the 100-year or 500-year flood. So you can have, community-wide impacts, bringing people out of flood insurance coverage, having important impacts like that. That can also help sell, projects.
Great. Thank you. And also in the chat, I think I mentioned it, a link to the guide that Michael spoke about is there along with the YouTube channel Sustainability and Resilience Series playlist. That's also in the chat there for you. Okay, next question. Let's start with Michael for this one. Can you discuss trail surfaces other than concrete or asphalt that may be considered resilient, but might be less expensive or easier to maintain over time?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so determining what the appropriate trail surface is and its resiliency attributes is quite complex, right? You have to take into effect life cycle cost, where you're sourcing the material, energy that goes into the material. Concrete is very energy intensive, for example. There are other surfaces available, crushed stone, examples like decomposed granite, cinder, or rock dust are quite sustainable surfaces. Of course, they're not going to be as durable as concrete, but they can be resurfaced over time. They are susceptible to washout and whatnot, but there are some techniques which are covered in the guide about hardening those types of surfaces and making them more long-lasting and durable. So yeah, again, I encourage you to check out the guide. It definitely has a lot of discussion on the topic of surface materials.
Anyone else on this one? This next question has come up a couple times now. Let's talk about NIMBYism and how sometimes folks don't want trails near them or near their backyards or near schools where their kids are out on the playground because, there's the notion that who knows who's on that trail or back there where we can't see anything, who knows what goes on there. So how do we talk about that? One, it's a legitimate concern. Let's be honest. We understand this, that sometimes in a public place, things happen anywhere, right? So one, how do we take those concerns seriously, but also at the same time, promote trails and understanding that, they are safe. They're safe as anything else.
I can start on this question, and I think this goes back to my slide on addressing gentrification and how important it is to have thorough and authentic community engagement. And also, just as planners, we know that with community engagement can come difficult conversations and acknowledging that the people that oftentimes come to these events or come to these engagement sessions are very used to not being heard and not being taken seriously. And especially if you're coming as an extension of their local government, being able to be upfront about the amount of power you have over the situation and who's actually making the decisions is very important. and presenting yourself authentically is important. But also just being able to hold tension in the room and knowing that you might not get to a place where everyone can agree, but that doesn't mean that the project needs to die necessarily, is important.
Yeah, well said. And just to one like little additional bullet point I might add is that authentic and like soulful community engagement process should be intended to build some level, or could be intended to build some level of consensus. You don't have to kowtow to like the squeakiest wheel, but there may be opportunities for the NIMBY in the room to either, if not get on board, at least be comfortable with the decisions being made. I think at least in this role, I think that's kind of more what our nonprofit is geared towards, is helping to, and I think this, the topics covered here are a good reflection of this. These cool trail projects have something for everyone, and it depends on their resilience, all of the typical trail things, plus all the interesting and creative things that and synthetic things that we've covered. So I think at least from my experience or our experience, it's helpful to understand the audience or the individual and understand which of those benefits you want to emphasize to them to hopefully advocate for something that they can be enthusiastic about.
Yeah, Christine, before you move
go
on,
ahead.
I want to add, one of the reasons we did this was because came up with the idea for this was I happened to live very close, within 100 feet of the 606 trail here in Chicago, and there were a number of things that brought up issues of resilience, especially at the community level, that led to our finding this panel. One of the big issues here was not NIMBYism as such, or total opposition to the trail, but concern, and legitimate concern within the community about people who would be displaced by rise. I think Michael brought this up originally. Concern, and so did Sarah. The rising property values as a result of introducing this amenity created fears among some people that we finally get this amenity and then we're priced out of the neighborhood, which is a very serious issue that planners do need to address, and probably integrate trails with other kinds of issues that deal with these questions like affordable housing.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. I should also say I was in front of a group of economic developers a couple weeks ago, and I was using the term NIMBY, and I was just getting blank stares and realized that not everyone might know what that means. So when we're talking about NIMBYism, we're talking about not in my backyard is what that means. I'm sure you could kind of gather from our conversation that it was something related to that. And to that, let's end on a positive note and talk about YIMBYism. Yes, in my backyard. So I will leave you with that today. And as a reminder, we're recording this session. We'll post it on our YouTube channel. It'll pop up sometime on Monday. So just head over to YouTube and just type in Planning Webcast Series. Will pop up. Don't forget to register for our upcoming sessions. ohioplanning.org/planning webcast. And I'll also have the slide decks available there as well. And you can find all this information, all the links, all the things you need up on our website. So thanks to this group. Great job, everybody. Thanks to this group for joining us. This has been really exciting to hear and sit down and talk about trails this afternoon. And everyone, thanks for joining us. And everyone have a great weekend. And we'll talk next time. Thanks, everybody.